Okay, good evening. It is March 24th. We are here for a special finance meeting about the annual budget. Tony will be leading the meeting in just a minute. We'll start roll call to my left.
Bob Hickey, School Board.
Anthony Rapp, Director of Business Administration.
Michael Roosevelt, School Board.
Ann Horner, School Board.
Cole Con, School Board.
Linda Stone, School Board.
Matthew McCarthy, Tech Integration.
And I'm Tracy Osecki. I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. And just walking in, we have...
We're doing roll call.
Is that the finance school board?
Andy Sanko, Superintendent.
Okay,
And
Mr. Teets on his way in.
okay, terrific. All right, Tony, floor is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Osecki. Before we begin, a reminder that for the most accurate and reliable information concerning our district, please refer to resources, websites, and social media platforms managed by the Council Rock School District. We advise the community to exercise caution when relying on the accuracy of social media and ask the community to verify any social media content with the district for accuracy. If you question what you are seeing, need a fact check, or additional details on a matter, please reach out to the district directly. Our contact information is readily available on our website at www.crsd.org. So we're looking at the 25-26 budget, which sounds weird to say, but just want to, before we begin, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that this budget is in a very, very early phase. We just compiled it last week and started reviewing it over the weekend. So there are things on here that are most likely that will change. So I just wanted to know that don't look at any number and think that we have a big problem. We just have a lot of the budget work that gets done is done by individual schools and departments, and now it's, this is before administration has had time to thoroughly review the budget. So just want to make that clear to everyone. So the agenda for tonight, the agenda is the 25-26 proposed final general fund. It should just be general fund budget. Budget overview. Talk about the revenues. Talk about the expenditures. Full day kindergarten in relation to the budget, the MBIT budget, and the next steps after tonight. So the first slide is in the budget overview. Right now it's maintaining the same rates for health insurance as in 24-25, where we use, as we always do, the 24-25 amounts for state funding. A lot of the state funding won't get budgeted till well after this budget is done. So even though there are certain things that are in the governor's budget, we don't use that budget because many of those things could change. This is kind of a delicate thing, but because we're in negotiations with the teachers, there are no increases in the budget, in the payroll budget for the teachers due to the negotiations that are ongoing. That is common practice for a school district in negotiations, not to put any sort of increase or step increases in the budget specifically because of the ongoing contract negotiations. We do put an amount in the non-personnel budget that would cover any expected increases after the contract's settled. However, at this point, this is only partially, we don't want to disclose what that amount is. Obviously, could affect our negotiating position, so we don't want to do that. And this budget does include a 0.57 increase, percent increase in real estate taxes for full day kindergarten. If you'll recall, last year when we were presenting on full day kindergarten, we calculated the cost and figured it was a 1.14% tax increase to cover the cost of full day kindergarten. So we said last year we added a 0.57% increase for full day kindergarten, and we do that again this year. Because of the Equine Index, We wanted to add half of it last year and half of it this year. So that is included in this budget, and that is the only tax increase that's included in this budget. So when we look at revenues, you can see the first column is the 25-26 estimated revenues. So we have $215 million of local, $62,664,000 of state, and $1,805,000 of federal, for a total revenue of $280,181,485. Compared to last year's budget, that's about a $2.5 million increase, with the difference is about 0.1%. The local revenues are up by about 0.26, state revenues are up by about 3.32, and federal revenues decreased by 1.44. That was due to the sunsetting of a federal grant in the current year that we're in. So this is around where we expected. This is around where we normally are with our title programs and IDEA programs. And I'm sorry, IDEA is actually in local revenue because it comes through the IU. But the title programs and there's some money from the Medicare Access Program in there. So that's our revenue. You can see that, you know, the revenues have moved to the point where they're getting flatter, especially when you start looking at the state. I mean, prior to last year, you could count on, you know, at least like $800,000 to $1 million of additional basic education funding, and maybe an additional $500 to $800 in special services, special education subsidies increase. But we're not seeing that anymore. I think we're under like 300,000. They're estimated, which again is not in this budget, for increase for basic education is like 300,000 and 100,000 for special education. So you're starting to see that our revenues are not, the revenues that we're getting from the state are not increasing in order to keep up with where we need, where our expenses are going. So, you know, again, it becomes more important that we rely on our local revenues, where we have, the only place where we have control in real estate taxes in order to increase taxes, increase our revenue. And right now it's a total of a 0.91%. And I know that the state revenue did increase, but a couple of things about that. Number one, we get an amount from the state every year for homestead farmsteads that we give back to the taxpayers. So that money doesn't come to us, but we don't get that until May. Because we don't get that until May, we don't put that in the budget. However, for comparability's sake, I added last year's amount to this year's budget, or to this, actually not to the budget yet, but to this display, and took it out of the taxes to make them more comparable. So, and then the other item with the state revenue is this increase. A lot of that is because, so as our salaries increase, we get a subsidy back from the state for half of the amount that we pay for retirement and Social Security. So every dollar that we pay an employee, we have to pay the state an extra 34 cents. And for every dollar that we pay an employee, we have to pay the federal government, and everybody has to do that practically, but 7.65%. We do get half of that back from the state. So as our salaries increase, those subsidies increase. So we do calculate that subsidy because it's pretty reasonable to know our salaries are going to be this much, we should expect this much revenue from it. So, any questions there?
Yeah, Tony, at some point, I think, isn't there going to be an adjustment in the state formula as a result of the litigation that had been going on for so long?
That was done last year.
Yeah.
So what that adjustment to the formula was made on the end of the formula, where the formula stays the same, but then certain districts that have higher poverty levels there's like an additional amount that goes out to those school districts, and so they apportion, you know, depending on the poverty levels. Council Rock, of course, does not qualify for any of that.
So
That's partially why we're not seeing our basic education go, because a lot of the money is going towards that, and it's not going to the regular basic education.
So it doesn't show up as a decrease in state funding, but it's just, there's greater funding to districts that qualify.
Yeah, there's greater funding.
Yeah.
But, you know, when you talk about a decrease, we're not getting what we used to get for more expenses, for more expensive contracts, for more expensive items. So really, you know, I would consider the state revenue a cut, because, you know, in the fact that we're not getting, our dollars of state revenue don't go as far as they used to.
Yeah.
And that extra 2 million that's in there, that's already earmarked for reimbursing us for Social Security and retirement.
Yeah. Well, we all knew that was coming because of that litigation.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Early on, you said that you used the state funding from last year, so
Yes.
which, the state funding from last year is the 650?
Yes. No, that's the state budgeted, that's the budgeted state funding from last year. We use the actual, so like, after the budget comes out, they tell us what we'll get in basic education. That's what we budget.
That's separate.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's what
that
we
comes
budget for
after.
this year.
Okay, that makes sense, thank you. Other questions? Just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're ready, Tony.
So this is the expenditures. It's a little bit smaller, but try to make it as big as I could. Broken it up into different categories. You can see that one side is the 25-26, and the other side is the 24-25, with the dollar difference between last year's budget and this year's budget, and the percentage difference. So administrators and confidential assistants, that would be that group of employees, this year are expected to have a salary of $8,068,661, with $4,426,609 in benefits for $12,495. Comparing that to last year, that's a decrease of $158,447, or 1.25%. I will remind the board that when we presented different issues with cost savings, we did eliminate a position in the administrator group that reduces that salary. So that's why, one of the reasons why there's a difference. Another reason is we've had some retirements, so that changes the course of where those salaries are. Professional staff, you can see that this is pretty static compared to last year. 93,316,591, 53,380 in benefits for 146,696. That is about $1.7 million greater than last year, and the majority of that, at 1.19% difference, is that's your full day kindergarten position. So we added the positions, and that's about what we said it would be for teachers. Added to the full day kindergarten, for the full day kindergarten. Again, as I said, there's no step increases in here because of the current contract status. But we do have that money in the budget. Support staff, they do have a contract, and they went from a total of salary and benefits of $35,125,882 to from $34,186,483. That is a dollar difference of $939,399. I remember there were some so that's increases, but there also are some additional positions for full day kindergarten in that number. And if you take like about half of this and that, you get to around where we said we would be position wise in increased cost, about $2.4 million. Other salaries, this is things like coordinator pay, curriculum, people working on curriculum that actually is decreasing by 166,163. That is also an area where we did do some increases, but it didn't increase as much as it normally would, because we don't know what some of those numbers are going to be, because we don't know what the contract will be. So those numbers there is an amount that we budgeted elsewhere for that. So you can see total salary and benefits, just based on the administrator's agreement and the support staff contract and full-day kindergarten is an increase of $2,342,982, or 1.17%. And then if you look, this is where some of our biggest increase is in non-personnel expenditures. We went from 79,284,700 to 92,557,175. That's an increase of 13.3 million, or 16.74% increase. That does include the salary difference that we talked about. That I brought up, is the salary money that we put aside for the teacher's contract, but I don't want to say what that is. So that's an increase of 13,272,000. This is where administration will be focusing the majority of our efforts in looking at the budget as we review it and say, you know, is this necessary? Is that necessary? So that is where we'll review the budget. So total expenditures, and this is where, you know, with the revenue and the expenditures. So expenditures are $295 million. So we're at you know, close to making that $300 million threshold. You know, that just so that went up you know, from 279 to 295, and if we go back to the last slide, our revenue does not keep pace with that. We go 3 million here and 15 million here. So we're you know, and the total deficit is $14.8 million between. So our revenues aren't keeping up with our expenses. So any questions on this?
Okay, Yoda and then Nikki.
Can you explain again the total expenditures column, because that's one of the biggest numbers. I mean, on the other slide, not the non-salary was the non-professional. Can you go to your other slide?
Slide?
Oh, no, go back, I'm sorry.
The non-personnel.
Non-personnel expenditures.
Yeah, that's right here. So that would be equipment, software, supplies, those types of expenses. Utilities, you know, anything that doesn't go to personnel, that isn't salary or benefit for an employee. So we usually call this the 300 to 900 section, because the budget is broken up into objects. 100 is salary, 200 is benefits, 300 is 300, 400, and 500 different kinds of contracts or contracts for services. 600 is supplies, 700 is capital equipment, 800 is other, and 900 is 800 is miscellaneous, 900 is other. So that's a smaller part of our budget, but that is, and that's also where, according to most business departments in school districts, when you don't have a contract, that's where you put the money you're putting aside for that contract in the budget.
And so, after the contract negotiations are finalized, then this total expenditure will go up, right? The total expenditure will go up?
No, the total expenditures, it'll move, not 92,557 will come down, and the teacher's column up here, professional staff column will go up. What?
No, it's like,
Yeah, I heard you.
But overall, the bottom line will be the same or
Yes.
similar.
Well,
You
know.
think it's gonna be similar?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
Yeah, you don't know. Okay.
This doesn't matter of question, Yoda's question was answered. That was my same question.
Okay, anybody else? Okay,
so discussing the revenues, so I did mention some of this before, but the state revenues include prior year homestead, farmstead amount for comparability purposes. We don't know what it's gonna be, but we did include it so that you didn't see a $6 million drop off in state revenue and an $8 million increase in local revenue. So that wouldn't be accurate. So it reduces local revenue and increases state revenue by using that for comparability purposes. The real estate tax increase of 0.57% for full-day kindergarten is included. That leaves us with the Act 1 index being at 4%. That leaves us with a remaining possible tax increase of 3.43%. Calculating what 1% tax increase is worth is $1,821,243. So you multiply that by 3.43, your total remaining possible tax increase in dollar amount is $6,246,862, which is about the same as last year, where each 1% will, if a person has an average assessment, what our district's average assessment is, it would cost them about $65 in additional taxes every 1%. So, and just to say that I did talk to Kevin Carpick from Cornerstone. His opinion is that the market will be good enough for a $5.5 million return on investments, earning from investments in the next year, which is exactly what we budgeted in the year that we're in, and we will be exceeding that budget this year. So that's some fine detail about the revenue.
questions? Okay, before we move on, I would just want to clarify that for the public, that bullet that says remaining tax increase of 3.43, he's saying remaining possible
Yes.
increase of 3.43. Nobody is saying that we're going to have a 3.43 tax increase. Okay?
Yeah, I was gonna say much the same thing. I would actually use the word maximum.
Yeah.
That's the maximum potential additional tax increase would be 3.4%.
And maybe, Tony, for the public, if anybody's listening, can you go over that, the 4% Act 1 index, just what that is? So that
Every year, the state issues what calculates based on different factors, including what teachers are being paid, what their increases were. They issue they call the Act 1 index because it's based on Act 1. And part of it was trying to, save taxpayers money. So what they do is they issue what's called the Act 1 index, and certain schools, every school has the same basic Act 1 index. This year, it's 4%. Last year, it was 5.1%. Some school districts, depending on their poverty level, will get additional money, additional percentage in their Act 1 index. We do not, again, qualify for any additional percentage. So our Act 1 index this year is 4%. That means, and then in January, we must make a decision, or the board must make a decision that whether or not we're going to increase taxes above the Act 1 index. If we do raise taxes above the Act 1 index, it has to go out to the public on a referendum by the spring primary. If or you choose not to exceed the Act 1 index, we filed a resolution, or the board approved a resolution to not increase taxes above the Act 1 index of 4%. So we're limited to a 4% tax increase. A maximum tax increase. We don't have to do 4%, but we can't go above it. So because of full-day kindergarten and our planning for that, we did decide that we were going to do a 0.57% tax increase this year to pay for the other half of the salaries for full-day kindergarten. So when you take 4% and take out the 0.57 that's already in this budget, that leaves a possible maximum additional 3.43 tax increase that's possible, not saying at all that that's what we're gonna ask the board to do.
Yoda?
So even with all this, assuming that we get the 5.5 for investments and the 6.2 from the Act One, right? The
No.
remaining possible tax increase is 6.2, right?
Yes.
Still not enough to cover the difference between expenditures.
Well, the expenditures, especially the non-personnel expenditures, have not been reviewed at the administrative level in the way that they need to be reviewed, and that they will be reviewed, so.
No, I agree, and every year we go through that, but on like, what you're showing us now, which is the first shot of it, it shows that there is a gap, right?
Yeah, there's a gap. We'll work to close that gap, keeping the best interest of students in mind, as always.
Right.
Other questions?
This is the last slide.
What's the last slide?
No, Mike just asked if this was the last slide. It is not, so.
Expenditures for next year's budget, again, salary and step increases for teacher contract negotiations is built into non-personnel spending. We only completed compiling the original budget last week and are beginning the process of review. I do want to point out that as much as that $14 or $15 million deficit appears, that is only 5% of our total expenditure budget. So, comparatively, it's a low amount. But it is there. Administration salary and benefits have decreased due to the elimination of the technology management position, and teacher and portion of support staff increases due to additional staff for full-day kindergarten. So the majority of the teacher increases for full-day kindergarten, part of the support staff increases full-day kindergarten. And as I said before, that number, and I'll show you on another slide, that number matches what we predicted, what we expected, not predicted.
Okay, other questions?
Well, can we just add something in there, Tony? So as Tony explained, we use that 17 number for teachers. As of today, we have 395 students registered for full-day kindergarten. So if we don't get the number that we built based on the projections of the first grade 5-year look back, that number 17 could go down, which that comes down by the need for one teacher. That number would be 16, or 2 teachers would be 15. But right now, as of today, we checked the numbers, we're at 395.
How many kids did we have enrolled in regular kindergarten this year?
I'll tell you in 1 minute, let me just look that up.
Which would be the AM and PM sections together.
Okay,
You to move on? Full-day kindergarten. Teacher and support staff salary budget increased to accommodate new kindergarten teachers and support staff as outlined in the full-day kindergarten presentations. Like we predicted, about $2.4 million of additional salary and benefits, which is covered by the tax increase of 0.57% that we added last year, one that we added last year and one that's in this budget now. So that covers the cost of full-day kindergarten. We'll continue to do the other startup costs that appear in 25-26. We will not budget for those costs, but we will pay them from the educational initiatives fund balance as we planned in the prior year and have done with the expenditures this year.
questions?
So, as of, for this, as of March 1st, there was 472 kindergarten students for the half-day kindergarten enrolled.
And you're at 375,
395.
395 now.
Thank you for that, Andy.
What were you planning on? What was the number that was planned for September?
I have to go back and look at that. It was a 202
Increase.
increase.
So 470, you're looking at 700.
That's what I thought. Was like,
So right now, we're at about 60% of what was to be expected.
and the district sees higher enrollments in the spring to summer or in the fall?
In the summer into the, yes,
But those numbers you just gave us, that was as of March 1st last year.
correct.
So we're still behind.
There are current enrolled students right now, 472, that are currently in kindergarten. There are
Oh,
300
I misunderstood. I thought you were giving us how many had registered by March 1st of last year.
No.
You're not. You're saying
no.
as of March 1st, that's how many we have. Okay,
I thought
so,
the same.
okay, that's good.
And just again, the model that we built on that projection of 202 additional students came from a 5-year look back of the first grade enrollment, because we had more consistency with that than with the half-day kindergarten. But we often see an uptick in enrollment when we get out of this school year into the summer.
So do you have any reason to think that we aren't gonna need those 17 teachers at this point, or?
We don't know. We built that 17 based on those projections.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that Tony has those 17 positions built in to what he's sharing with you tonight.
My question is, based on the registration that we've seen, we're on track as far as you can gather one way or the other?
As far as we can tell.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
So the MBIT budget, they're considering a budget with an additional teacher's salary. The total budget increase to participating schools with the new position is $640,824. Total budget increase without the new position is $528,457. The next statement was true when I wrote it, but 5 minutes before the meeting started, it became untrue when they sent out a reconciliation of our costs for next year. We calculated our contribution would decrease from $2,548,483 to $2,382,965, and that's based on the budget with the additional teacher added. According to the printout that they sent, it's about $2,257,427 in our amount due to the MBIT according to this budget. That is just for the I believe that's just for the educational portion. There is a capital portion that's not included in this number, that is included in my number. So the estimate that we put together is close, but I think it's probably gonna be more than that once you add in the capital portion. But there was a large reconciliation last year because there was an issue that had occurred in a prior year with the accounting of the MBIT, and they had to do a fix. So they're saying now that that's the education portion, not the capital portion, is $2,257,427 is the Council Rock share with the additional teacher.
So our cost is actually going technically down.
Maybe.
Right. It's the oddest thing that NBIT does, and we just got out of it, how they do their budgeting. They budget based on the past 3 years of enrollment, but then they reconcile to actual.
2 years later.
2 years, right.
Right.
So what happened, like I said, if you remember last year at this time, I came and I was like, look, I feel awful because, the budget is, what we budgeted was like $300,000 off because of something that happened at MBIT, so that got corrected last year. So our numbers are still going up, but our payment could possibly go down depending on when everything's reconciled, but at least that number is close as far as what you're trying to figure into the budget. So it's not like, next month, oh, guess what, we messed up, and no, it's actually another $250,000, which is what happened last year. So this year it'll be at least accurate as far as Tony's concerned. And the one thing that's good about it is in prior years, our administration and our BA was never included in the MBIT discussions. So they just kind of got presented with this number at this time of year. At least now, the business agent at MBIT is in constant communication, like once a month or once every 2 months with Tony and all the other business managers throughout the district, so.
This is the new business manager, right?
Correct, who is a Council Rock, I don't know if she was a graduate, but she is a Council Rock resident. And her daughter was a Council Rock student. Yeah, actually, that's where we came from. Bless you. We were at that's why Ann and I were somewhat tardy, because we had our committee of the whole meeting. We're gonna vote on this budget next week. So then it'll be finalized as far as that's concerned. So then our numbers will hopefully be a little more solid. If there's any questions or concerns before then, please let me know before we get to next Tuesday, because they are planning on voting on it next week.
I do just want to echo what you said. Since Dr. Covell has taken the reins at MBIT, we do have monthly meetings with the BAs and the superintendents. And we go through this. I mean, we know that the addition of one teacher at MBIT is about 1% of their budget. So we know, every step of the way, and Tony sits on those meetings with us, so.
Yeah.
It's a good addition.
Yeah, the employee that they're adding is to the electrical department, which is probably the second most or third most popular program right after welding. So it'll add, initially I think it'll be around 20 students, but then once he gets acclimated, it'll be another 40 students, which will push that enrollment to over 1,000 kids, of which Council Rock's enrollment increases every year, which is why our costs go up. Our cost per student goes down, but the costs go up because you pay on that percentage. We're at like roughly 19.5% of the total. I think it's 19.8.
It was 19 something, yeah.
19.88.
Yeah.
I believe last year was 18.88.
Yeah. From 16, where we were 4 years ago, it was 16%, now it's closer to 19, so figure 3% of a $12 million budget. So.
Fair enough.
Next item is next steps. So as I said, we're going to review the budget to reduce deficit beginning this week. I am awaiting information from Keystone regarding next year's expected earned income tax results. That's one area of revenue that has been increasing over a year. They give me a number that we usually get pretty close to budget-wise. I haven't gotten that number yet, so that's something that will be added to the budget once we receive that number. Although I am hearing that the numbers have been decreasing. So when they changed how they were collecting the EIT tax, and they had collectors named by the state for different counties, and our earned income tax was improving because things were moving in the right direction as far as money that wasn't coming into Council Rock that should have been started coming into Council Rock. So that's why it's been increasing. I'm hoping that they're looking at an increase next year, but I am cautious about it. By the way, this is the last slide. We're gonna also just want to remind you, one of the reasons that the budget was is not where we would like it to be is because we had to wait for, there was a mid-year step increase for the teachers, and we had to wait for that to be in place before we could do a lot of the budget calculations in that area, which is obviously one of our biggest places to put the budget together. So that was only done a few weeks ago. But we also have a teacher's contract, which we've talked about. We are, the printers and copiers that we have throughout the buildings, that is going out for RFP, that we are required to do that as our contract with our current carrier is up, so we have to go out to RFP. So that may affect either positively or negatively. I think you can guess which way I'm expecting costs. And our janitorial services contract, which did go out to RFP, we do have the bids back, and we hope to be presenting that. We plan to present that, our recommendation for that contract at the facilities committee meeting on the first Thursday in April. And we will provide additional information to the board and the public in April 25. Don't think we're going to have it available for the finance committee in April. I believe it's, I'm not sure what date it is, but it's in early April. We'll probably look at it. So we get through everything that we have to do later April. And we can talk about maybe
Are
setting
you
that up at the
planning
next
for
finance.
another special meeting?
We should have another special meeting.
The finance meeting in April is the 10th.
Yeah, so probably maybe a couple weeks after that. And then we'd like to also do another budget forum like we did last
right.
year. Hopefully, maybe I thought we did a good job getting the word out, but we didn't have much attendance, so maybe we can get the word out better. And I mean, Andrea, as always, does a great job, so. Maybe people just didn't want to listen to me drone on for an hour. But,
If I could just jump on that, Tony, one of the things we have done well at getting the word out has been the tax program. We're receiving more applications than we have received before.
That's great.
we're still not near where we budget, what we budget for it, but I would, we will include, this budget does include the tax rebate program, the budget for the tax rebate program. Obviously, in June, along with the budget, we would recommend just continuing our resolution for the tax rebate as it is written in the, as it is currently in place. But we are about 3 times as much money given out this year as we did in the first year. So.
That's terrific, good. Okay, I know Linda and then Yoda, and I don't know anybody else.
Well, quick with the rebate, that would be, they would file in 2025 for taxes paid in 2024. So you use your W.
Yeah, so it would be, the rebate would be for any taxes that were paid in the school year that we're in, it would be rebated next year. So whatever was paid between July, August, September, July through December of this school year will be rebated next year, and it becomes available on July 1st of 2025. And it will go, our program, the state cuts their program off after 6 months, our program goes for the full 12 months, because then we can include, there are a lot of people that don't get their, they get their return filed with the state late, so they get it in. So we're still getting, even though we're in 2025 and the rebate's been available for over 6 months, we're still getting either file like that. Keep in mind that each rebate application is about 4 pages. So.
The state gives you till December
Yes.
31st, right?
In fairness, though, the state often extends it beyond. So.
And do you have a number for the printer and copier contract from '24 and the janitorial, just not an exact number, but
I don't have.
I mean, I'm just wondering how big an impact those
Well,
numbers are.
the janitorial is, the printer copier is, I believe, a couple $100,000. The janitorial is, and that's another contract where You know, we're not seeing our state revenue increase by any measurable amount, but our contracts are going up 4% and 3% each year.
Right.
We have the Durham contract where we have included in the Durham contract that, or in the budget for transportation, we did, that budget was put together with full-day kindergarten bus schedules in mind, based on full-day kindergarten bus schedules. So the routes that needed to be added for full-day kindergarten were added. The routes that were removed, that needed to be removed for the end of half-day kindergarten were also removed, which was a net savings at about $343,000 like we predicted.
And the other savings on that, Tony negotiated the Durham annual increase from 4.5% to 4% last year for the life of the agreement, which doesn't sound like that much, but over the life of that agreement, that's, a couple $1 million.
So, in summary, without looking at the teacher's contract or these other items, we're looking at a $15 million deficit in our expenditures over.
Well, it's in this very preliminary budget that's in place, so. Well, there's a lot of work to be done between now and when we think the budget's fine.
And only half of that is, we're going to achieve only half of that based on a Cornerstone prediction of earnings.
No, the Cornerstone prediction is in the budget. We budget that amount, which is exactly what we budgeted this year.
Okay,
So
that's already in there.
yes.
Where would you have put that on the revenue side?
Local revenue.
Okay.
Okay, Yoda and then Ed.
So the income tax estimate, is it already in the budget right now? Is it similar to last year, so that you don't have it?
No, it's not in the budget now.
It's not.
No, the income tax budget the earned income tax budget is exactly what it was this year.
So it is the same, you just kept it at the same amount,
Yes,
but you think it may go down?
I'm hoping it goes up, but.
Yeah, but you said.
It's been going up. but
Keystone told you that.
Well, Keystone hasn't told me anything yet. I'm
Okay.
just things that I've heard from other business managers. But I don't know. It might be different for different places.
Because it traditionally goes up, right? Or at
It's
least
been
the
going
last
up,
few
yes.
years, yeah.
It's been going up. It's, besides real estate tax, it's our tax that has the best chance of increasing. As
Right.
people's salaries increase, their earned income tax increases. But we have been getting some money back from years where we weren't getting money we were supposed to get. That's coming to a close as the system is more and more accurate from the beginning. But hopefully, that's why we've talked in the past about the occupational tax, which is never going to increase because it is what it is. And, we have as many people living in the district as we have, and they pay an occupational tax. So earned income tax is probably our tax with the second best chance of increasing naturally.
Ed?
I have a question, but an observation. It seems to me 15 million was about where we were at this point last year in terms of the difference.
I think that was 2 years ago.
2 years ago and last year?
Yeah, last year we were pretty close. We were a lot closer from the beginning. Well, I don't want to say that, but
Yeah.
it depends on where we've looked at it in the past. But we had more time last year.
Yeah, well, my question is, where were we at the start of this budget year? In terms of deficit?
this budget year, I believe it was, at the start of the budget year that we're in now, I believe it was like 6 or 7 million.
That's what I thought, yeah. And that's typical in memory.
Yeah, it's been this way, as I found out, it's been this way in the past. And
Right.
it's, you know, we have a good administration that does a great job fixing this, so, not fixing it, but, you know, getting costs to where they should be.
I know, it's just something that people have a hard time sometimes getting their heads around, the idea that we're starting the year with a budget gap. But we always
But we always,
close the gap.
we also start the year, we often start the year with a budget that has a budget, a final budget that has a budget gap.
Right, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was around $2 million last year, in the year that we're in. It was closer to 3.5 the year before that. And we always do better, but, you know, we again, I know I'm a broken record, but we do conservative budgeting.
Yeah.
And, you know, we want to make sure that we're not spending more than, we want to make sure that we're looking at all our expenses and making sure that they all get in the budget, and we don't look at a revenue unless, we don't look at increasing our revenue unless we're reasonably sure that it's going to increase. I will say that not another issue, but another factor is I believe we have more people. One of the things when we calculate the real estate taxes, we have to look at a collection percentage, and that means, you know, how many people are going to pay their taxes, which is a very low percentage of people that don't pay their taxes in Council Rock. We have to look at people who pay in the discount period, because that's collectability that we lose when they pay in the discount period. And I think Council Rock is getting, the number of people paying, or the amount of money that we're not getting because of people paying in the discount period is going up. So,
So in other words, more
Most people
people are
are
paying
being-
at the discount period.
yes.
Yeah.
They're being fiscally away.
But don't we invest it?
What's
Because
that?
if we get the money early, then we can invest it.
Well, yes, so that.
We make up for it.
You're right, exactly right. That increases the amount of money that we're able to earn from investments, because the earlier people pay, the more we have to invest.
Right. Other questions? Mr. Roosevelt?
So I think the observation from the presentation is that expenses are rising faster and our revenues are not keeping pace with the rate of expenses rising. Part A. Part B is we do have some unknowns.
Yes.
And as it stands, which I know this district in your office has done a wonderful job over the past couple of years of closing that gap that we've mentioned tonight. But as it stands, there is about 0.6% between the Act 1 and kind of where that number of, which is, I understand, a max, which is a good max of 3.43. About 0.5% of room before we hit the Act 1 index. Of 4%. 4% is the Act 1 index that this board has agreed we're not going to exceed.
Yes.
And as this budget stands right now, we need a 3.43 tax increase to reconcile everything.
No.
What's that 3.43?
3.43
Doesn't that help
is-
close the gap between
That
the,
would help close the gap. Yes, yes, okay, I'm sorry, yes.
Right.
I misunderstood.
so the 3.43 is used to close the gap.
Yes.
But we really only have another 0.6 before you run into 4%.
I'm not for that.
Well, 5.
No,
You can't tax more than 4%.
yes,
So we're talking about 0.43, I'm rounding for all intents and purposes.
4.3. Oh, 0.4, okay.
Right? 3.43 is about 3.5. And
Yes.
4 is the max. So it's about 0.5% that there is room left to finish closing that gap.
No, it's the other way around.
Other way around.
Yeah, there's 3.5% that taxes can be increased. We've only increased taxes
Correct.
0.57.
Right. We're speaking the same thing, I think. For some reason.
Yeah.
Some people don't understand. Perhaps that's my problem. So in any case, hypothetically, this is probably what's happening across the state. is expenses are rising and revenues aren't keeping pace, right? And there's the Act 1 index, which you can't exceed unless you go for a referendum. So in a situation where a district doesn't have room to make up the difference between their Act 1, they have to reconcile that out of their general fund.
Generally, yes.
Right, and if you continue to do that, your general fund is decreasing and there's a problem.
Yes.
Which is why the conservative budgeting that you're presenting demonstrates higher expenses and lower revenues.
Yes.
Which we've seen in the past generally work out in Council Rock's favor of an increase.
Yes.
But we are narrowing this window.
Absolutely.
And so for this reason, many of us have liked the idea of consistent and predictable tax increases. We did, a couple years ago, the board passed or asked you to do a 5-year budget plan, which was about 2%. This was, last year tax increase was about 2.6, right? And that 0.6 was to adjust for full-day kindergarten with the understanding that there'd be another 0.6 this year, which we've seen in this presentation. None of this, though, addresses the teacher's contract, the custodial contract, the printer contract, which I understand is minimal. This is what this presentation has gone through. But it also doesn't address master plan potentials, which we looked at a couple meetings ago in finance, I believe, where it was discussed that there's about $82 million of borrowing power that the district currently has. And if a wraparound procedure is used, that could increase to about 117 million.
Right.
And then it was discussed with a 1% tax increase that could increase another 30 million, bringing us about to 150. We also looked at I think it was phrased, a feasible plan that was kind of numbered around 187, right? So there may be more borrowing power, but the closer we get to our Act 1, we lose that ability to both close gaps and have borrowing power.
Yes.
So I mean, I'm looking at the reality that this year, probably starting somewhere in the 2.6. And then there's all of this gap that we finished and master planning to go, but we only have a hard wall of 4% from Act 1. There is not a lot of room there as it stands. Cuts have to be made, or creative adjustments, I think, would be, cut's probably a bad word. I don't want to say cut.
I tried to avoid that word.
Right, yeah, so we don't want to use the word cut, but adjustments need to be figured out. Is that about right?
Yes.
Does that make sense to the initial?
I have a question, but when you're done.
Yeah,
Okay. Dr. Sanko, last year, if I remember correctly, there were a few positions that the administration came to us and said, I want a budget for this position and that position. Where are we? I assume there'll be some kind of a similar ask this year. Is that something that has been discussed or will be discussed at the April meeting?
So you're talking about when we came to the board last year and said, would you consider
You want a next security
an
guard?
EL teacher? We're not there yet in this process. We're trying to narrow down what Tony shared with you tonight, particularly in those 3 to 900s. And that'll require us to meet with all the administrators and curriculum coordinators. So as this work gets more focused and we have a better understanding, we will come and say to you, here are the areas we feel that there are some needs. Things that we've all talked about at this table have been additional literacy specialists, math specialists at the middle level. We spoke with the board last year about the teachers on special assignment. So we're not there and ready to say to the board yet, this is what's been identified by our group. But that'll be, as we start narrowing down the gap that Tony demonstrated tonight, we'll have a better idea.
Okay, thank you.
So,
And usually we get to that around April.
Mr. Hickey?
just as a follow-up, because that's a great question. So you don't even have it figured in at all in this non-personnel expense? What your possible ones could be?
No, we collected a list of wants and needs that came by way of teachers and administrators, and we have to, work our way through that.
Yeah, no, it's, because that'll be a number that will only increase, like if it was figured into the non-personnel items, then it's, where you're at least, so now you could be asking for a number of personnel. I would assume that you're gonna be looking for some, and then we have to see where we can go from there, from, what serves the district, but.
And just by example, and this is just for example purposes only, in the budget, we built in an additional psychologist. Well, if we don't get to our projections on the full-day kindergarten, we may not need the additional psychologist, and then we may be able to say, we'd like to trade that position out for a math specialist at the middle school. So that's why I can't give you a hard, fast answer, or neither can Tony tonight.
Mr. Tate?
I was just gonna say, I like this presentation a lot, Tony. I think it's nice and straightforward.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Ms. Khan?
Just curious, next steps, so will you present in the April finance meeting, or will there be another special
I
finance
think we'll
meeting?
need another special finance
Yeah,
meeting
okay.
later in April.
I think, we're pretty far apart right now, but I would encourage you, and this is just my own personal opinion, but I would encourage you, when we're talking about what positions could be added to make the district great, please come to us with those positions, because, we want to weigh it, even though we're far apart and even though we have a lot of work to do on budget. If there's a position that the administration thinks can make the district great, I'd like to consider it.
I think thank you for that, and I think to Mr. Tate's point, a couple of years ago, we sat here and we looked at a number like 15 or 16, and as we narrowed it down and had those weekly meetings with coordinators, we were able to prioritize and then come back with something that is more reasonable, that we could get our arms and heads around, and then come to you with something, that is not as broad as what you're seeing tonight.
I guess a question from me, Mr. Roosevelt talked about that this is probably something that's happening statewide. Do you think that that's true, at least in the welfare district?
In the welfare district.
Yeah. So do you think then, last year when we had the Act 1 index was 5.3 or something like that, you said this is unusual for it to be that high, and expect next year that it's gone down. And so this is next year it's gone down. But if you're saying that, the revenue isn't keeping up with the expenses, we're not the only district. So what do you think? Is this what we can predict in the future? What about the Act 1 index in the future?
I mean,
Any insights?
the expectation is that it will most likely go down next year. There's different philosophies about what the Act 1 index is supposed to be. I'm not espousing any philosophy. One of the philosophies though is that in some school districts do this, where their tax increase every year is just the Act 1 index, and that's what you're supposed to raise your taxes by. I'm certainly not saying that that's what it means, but that's it. I mean, it would make my life a lot easier. But it's not. I'm not saying that. It's just the Act 1 index, is what it is, and it does take away some of your ability to plan for the future. And that, you have years where it's higher, and you don't want to pass up that opportunity because of what might come in the future. But it's the law, that's what we have to live with.
And we also don't want to have to hit that
Yeah.
index for the taxpayers.
Absolutely. A lot of taxpayers that are fixed income.
And you don't want to be caught in a situation where you're dipping into your general fund.
Yes.
Because you can't raise more than the Act One to cover your deficit.
Right, and the other, and we usually do budget a deficit, but we usually are not there by the end of the year. But, we start consistently using general fund money to pay expenses, to pay for budgeted expenses. That's gonna affect our bond rating, which is gonna affect our ability to borrow for needed construction projects. So we have to be very, very careful and make sure that we're doing the best that we can to get, make sure that our budgets are correct and they're the best budgets we can do, so we can provide the best education that we can for our students. Because that's what we're all here for, right?
That's right.
And I think I'm sorry, who got cut off? Tony, go. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna add to Mr. Kate, I thank you for complimenting the presentation. I always want to make sure that when it comes to this kind of thing, that I recognize Andrea Mangold, who does a great job with every one of these presentations that you see. She's looking at and making sure that they're right, and she spends a lot of time with me today working on this presentation. So, I don't think she gets enough credit, so I want to give her credit for that.
Thank you, Andrea.
I was going to say the other thing that we have to be plugged into. We know as recently as last year, some districts had an opportunity, as Tony said earlier, and they exceeded the Act One index. And we don't want to surprise our community with, I don't think anybody would think it's a good idea to go to referendum, but there are some avenues to get above that. And we'll work really hard to narrow this down, as we have in the past.
All right,
Okay.
is that it? Anybody else? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.